people are going to guess from your name that you will have a similar background to a religious background to Nusrat Ghani. These claims basically add on to these long-standing allegations. There is an Islamophobia problem in the Conservative Party, same as there is an anti-Semitism problem in the Labour Party. Is that your personal experience?
It's not my personal experience. I spent a few years, as you said, in Downing Street, and then I became a special advisor in a Conservative government to one of the great offices of state. But just because it's not my personal experience, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen to other people. And I do think there are certainly cases of Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. There was a report a year ago or so, I think, that looked into this, that documented a lot at local association and at grassroots level. And I just think something like this, someone like Nuz, who is a good politician, was a good minister, for her to raise something like this, it does need to be acted upon and taken seriously, because it's really a good thing, I think, that we have a very diverse cabinet, possibly the most we've ever had in this country. But that can all be quickly undone if these allegations are just seen to be dismissed and kind of brushed to one side.
But the thing is that, by all accounts, they weren't dismissed. She spoke to the Prime Minister at the time about it. So after being sacked, she got a meeting with the Prime Minister. She discussed this. She had this conversation with, she says, one of the whips. Since then, the Chief Whip, Mark Spencer, said, she's talking about me. The allegation was against me. And he denies it and says it's defamatory. The Prime Minister said to her to raise it with Conservative Party Central Office as a formal investigation. She chose not to do that. She had the option of doing that, and she chose not to do it. So it's a bit rich to then say no one investigated this when you yourself have not gone through the process to order that investigation. Or do you think that actually what should have happened at the time is just what's happened today, which is a Cabinet Office inquiry?
Yeah, I think definitely that the latter, in terms of the government itself, should have looked into this. There is a formal complaints process at CCHQ. I just don't think that was the right way of handling this, because it wasn't really a party issue. She was a minister. She was told she was going to stop being a minister because of, to quote unquote, her Muslimness. I'm not really sure what that is.
No, I wondered what that meant. Yes.
Yeah, so it is for the government to look into, rather than this kind of internal party process, which does serve a purpose, but I just don't think it was the right way of handling it. And it just is a bit of a shame that only because it's become public a few years later is it now being acted upon, but it is better late than never, I suppose.
I mean, it's very important, I think, to establish the truth here, as such as we can establish the truth, because if it's a private conversation between two people, it's quite literally a he said, she said. What she has alleged is quite shocking, although it would appear that Mark Spencer, the allegation, according to what she said, was reporting what he had been told, as opposed to it was his view that because she was Muslim, it was an issue, her being in government. So the allegation doesn't necessarily, him passing it on is not necessarily such a terrible thing to have said. But he claims this conversation didn't. There was a conversation, but he did not say this. This is such a serious allegation to make that a lot of people say, well, you kind of need proof of this, but it's not possible to have proof of a private conversation between two people unless one of them was taping it.
Exactly, which makes it very difficult. I mean, both sides of this seem irreconcilable in terms of what has happened or what has not happened, and therefore an investigation is needed, but even the investigation itself may be limited in terms of what it can find out. But it isn't just about the investigation. I think it's also about how this is handled and how this is seen. And we've seen the line from Number 10 change, as we've seen on Partygate and other issues from yesterday, where either they might think it would go away, or this has not been dealt with in the right way, or perhaps there's not much to see here, to now suddenly, because of increasing pressure, not least from cabinet ministers and I imagine some backbenchers, that there is going to be this inquiry. So it feels quite dramatic, but the inquiry itself can only do so much. It's really about outcomes and action.
It is very noticeable, isn't it, that even after Number 10 was saying, well, look, the Prime Minister's spoken to about this, but she chose not to bring an investigation, that after that point, Sajid Javid and also Nadeem Zahawi, who we spoke to a bit earlier, had both very prominent ethnic minority and Muslim figures in this government, that they should both have put out tweets offering, well, not to support Nusrat Ghani, saying, look, if this happened, there needs to be a proper investigation, rather undermining Number 10's stance. Do you think that they've been pushed into doing this?
Well, I think there isn't much cabinet cohesiveness of late, I think it's fair to say. And as you know, it's a very febrile atmosphere and the Prime Minister's authority is fast draining away. So I think people in the cabinet feel more able to say and do what they actually think. And there's a bit of history here. Sajid Javid called for an investigation into Islamophobia a few years ago. So I think...
Well, during the leadership contest, all the leadership candidates promised that there would be one.
Yes, exactly. So I think, people feel quite strongly about this issue, but I wasn't surprised. Even Penny Mordaunt, there was a supportive tweet. I wasn't surprised that there were people, expressing their views in this way rather than perhaps just sticking to the Number 10 line. Because I think they've tried and tested that on a few other occasions and it hasn't really worked out.
Indeed. I mean, there are some people, though, who are saying, look, this is Nusrat Ghani she is very, very well respected as an MP and very much liked, and not seen as sort of a troublemaker, but she's been part of the COVID recovery group of MPs. Many would think she's someone who quite happily see the back of Boris Johnson, that this has been brought out, this has been timed as a way of damaging him in a very, very damaging week ahead of the Sugray report, and that this is a political calculation rather than anything else, and the timing would suggest that.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who will certainly think that, and does it add to this drip narrative of government in chaos, of things not being acted upon properly in a way perhaps that they should have been. But I also think, looking at the actual substance here, which is very serious, and it is quite difficult if you have experienced any kind of discrimination to even talk about it or to think, well, actually, will this impact my career? What will my colleagues think of me? Am I making too much out of something? You do sometimes check yourself in these situations. So I do think, it takes courage to even raise these issues. And the fact that she now has, it does warrant investigation. And actually, it goes back to the other point about showing the workings behind the scenes, that it's because it's become public, we are seeing action, whereas it could have been dealt with in a different way a couple of years ago.
Yeah, all very good points. Mayor Hussain, former government special advisor and Downing Street press officer, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.